The kettle whistles softly in the background. A faint smell of fried onions lingers in the air. Somewhere nearby, toast pops up with a gentle clack. And for a brief moment, the morning feels like it used to. Not rushed, not packaged, just real. If you remember waiting for your mum to spoon semolina into bowls, or the way dripping melted into thick white bread like morning gold, then you're already halfway there. This isn't just about food, it's about warmth. It's about quiet rituals before the day began, when breakfasts were slow, hearty, and full of love. Today, we're diving back into a time when the breakfast table told a story of working hands, tin plates, and recipes passed down through the steam. Stay with us until the end. You might just rediscover something you haven't tasted since childhood. Before cereal came in shiny boxes, before takeaway toast and protein bars, there was a breakfast dish that told a deeper story. Kedgeree, a warm, fragrant blend of smoked haddock, fluffy rice, hard-boiled eggs, and just a hint of curry powder. It might seem unusual now, but for generations of Britons, especially in the early and mid-20th century, Kedgeree was the elegant heart of a proper morning meal. Its origins trace back to colonial India, where British officers took inspiration from a traditional Indian dish called khichdi. They brought it home, softened its spices, and gave it a new identity, one that quickly found its way into Edwardian breakfast rooms, post-war family kitchens, and working-class cookbooks alike. Picture this: a quiet Sunday morning. The haddock simmers in milk, while steam fogs the windows. The smell is smoky, salty, with a whisper of turmeric and onion. A pat of butter melts into the rice, and the soft crunch of fresh parsley is the finishing touch. You sit at the table, maybe still in your dressing gown, and spoon it up slowly, letting the warmth chase away the chill in the air. It wasn't fast, it wasn't cheap, but it felt like care. Kedgeree wasn't just food, it was ritual, the kind that brought families together before the chaos of the day. Some had it with toast, others added cream, and some just loved it for its simplicity. But no matter the version, one thing was always true: it made the morning feel complete. Today, you'd be lucky to spot it on a menu outside a posh countryside B&B. It faded quietly, pushed out by convenience and speed. But for those who remember, just the smell of smoked fish or a dash of curry in the air can bring it all back. The calm, the comfort, the sense that mornings used to matter, and maybe, just maybe, it's time we brought that feeling back. There was a time when the sharp, unmistakable smell of grilled kippers drifting through the house meant just one thing: breakfast was about to make a statement. Not subtle, not soft, but bold, briny, and proud. Grilled kippers, whole herring, split open, salted, smoked, then sizzled under a broiler, were once a staple of the British morning table. Especially in seaside towns and working-class homes, this breakfast wasn't just tradition, it was fuel. Fish for breakfast might seem strange to modern ears, but back then, it made perfect sense. High in protein, rich in omega-3s, and packed with flavor, kippers were the working man's power meal, and the housewife's proof she could prepare a real plate of food from scratch. Their story goes back hundreds of years. Kippers were cheap, plentiful, and easy to preserve, which made them a staple for families trying to stretch every shilling. But more than that, they were tied to place. The docks of Grimsby, the smokehouses of Craster, and the cold, salty air of mornings along the coast. You'd wake up to the scent of fish oil meeting flame, the sizzle of skin crackling under heat, and maybe a dollop of mustard or a twist of lemon on the side. The table would be simple: a chipped plate, a mug of strong tea, and steam rising off the fish, like a quiet reminder that not all meals have to be pretty to be perfect. For some, grilled kippers were love at first bite. For others, an acquired taste, one you learned to appreciate around the same time you learned to tie your school tie or stomach black coffee. And even if you wrinkled your nose as a kid, chances are you remember someone in your house absolutely swearing by them. They were warm, they were real, and they were proudly British. Now, you're more likely to find them vacuum-packed at the back of a supermarket fridge, if you're lucky. Most mornings are rushed, sanitized and microwave safe. But every so often, someone pulls out the grill tray, opens a tin of kippers, and brings that smell roaring back to life. And in that moment, everything slows down, if only for a bite. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't delicate, but if you grew up in a certain kind of British household, liver and onions with fried bread was more than just a meal. It was a badge of resilience, a breakfast for people who worked with their hands, got up before the sun, and didn't complain when the days were long and cold. The liver, usually lamb or pig, was sliced thin and fried up with sweet, golden onions until it was tender and rich. And then came the real showstopper, thick slices of white bread, fried in the leftover fat until crisp, golden, and unapologetically greasy. It stuck to your ribs, it coated your fingers, and somehow it made the whole world feel warmer. The history of liver and onions at breakfast goes back to times when waste wasn't an option. Every part of the animal had a purpose. Liver was cheap, full of iron, and easy to cook. But more than that, it was filling. In industrial towns, it was served at greasy spoons and corner cafes to men in overalls and steel-toe boots. At home, mums would fry it up before the kids even opened their eyes. The smell alone, that deep, earthy aroma, was enough to drag a half-asleep teenager to the table. But this dish wasn't just for the blue-collar crowd. In some homes, it was considered a weekend treat, the kind of breakfast you made with care. Slow-fried onions, a splash of gravy on the side, maybe a pinch of sage or black pepper if you were feeling fancy. And always that fried bread, bubbling in the pan, soaking up the last bit of flavor, becoming something more than just toast, something indulgent, something proud. Today, liver has all but disappeared from the breakfast menu. Younger generations wrinkle their noses. Fried bread gets swapped for low-fat spreads and air-fried substitutes. But for those who remember, it's hard to forget the sound of onions sizzling, the weight of a proper breakfast in your stomach, and the quiet pride in eating something that came not from a packet, but from history. Before butter was the star of the spread, and before margarine lined the fridge shelf in every British home, there was something else, something simpler, heartier, and, to many, even more delicious: dripping. Not the prettiest name, but for those who grew up in the post-war years or in working-class estates, toast with dripping was a morning staple that carried the taste of yesterday's roast into today's breakfast. Made from the fat and juices collected after roasting meat, especially beef, dripping was stored in a dish, often layered with rich, golden jelly beneath a creamy white top, and when spread thickly on hot toast, it melted into the bread like liquid gold. For many, it was the breakfast of childhood. A cold winter morning, the fire barely lit. You'd hear the scrape of the knife across the toast and smell the warmth rising from the crust. A pinch of salt, maybe a crack of pepper, and suddenly you had something that felt indulgent, even if it was just leftovers. Dripping was resourceful, it was flavorful, and it reminded people that even after the roast was gone, there was still something to savor. Its history speaks to the ingenuity of past generations. In households where money was tight and nothing went to waste, dripping became a quiet tradition. It was passed down, not as a recipe but as a habit. Some families would even spread it on thick white bread without toasting it, letting it melt slowly against a warm cup of tea. Others added a bit of Marmite or layered it with sliced onions for extra punch. Every family had its way, but they all understood one thing: it wasn't just about eating, it was about making the most of what you had. Now dripping has all but vanished from breakfast tables. Too rich, too unhealthy, too old-fashioned, or so they say. But for those who remember, it brings back something deeper than taste. It brings back a mother's hand reaching for the tin, a father's nod of approval, a kitchen that smelled like love and leftovers, and a time when flavor didn't come from a packet, but from memory. There was a time when British breakfasts were brave, not bland, not beige, but bold, and deviled kidneys were a perfect example. If the name alone makes you blink, you're not alone. But back in the early to mid-20th century, This dish wasn't seen as strange or extreme. It was proper, it was fiery, it was full of character. Made from lamb's kidneys, sliced and simmered in a rich sauce of mustard, cayenne pepper, Worcestershire, and butter, deviled kidneys brought a kick to the morning that could wake you faster than any cuppa ever could. The dish has roots in Victorian kitchens, where deviling, that is, aggressively seasoning with spices, was a popular way to add life to organ meats. But in the decades that followed, deviled kidneys became a breakfast mainstay in boarding schools, army mess halls, and country cottages. For some, it was served alongside toast soldiers or atop a baked potato. For others, it came sizzling on a plate, still steaming, with a bit of parsley for pride. The flavor? Rich, peppery, and unapologetically meaty. The smell? Pungent in the best way, like someone meant business. In homes where tradition still held strong, it was a Saturday ritual. Your granddad might have called it real man's food. Your gran might have prepared it the old-fashioned way, with a heavy hand of spice and no apologies. It wasn't the sort of thing you ate in a rush. It demanded attention. It told a story of empire flavors, of austerity kitchens, of making meals from what was available and elevating them into something powerful. These days, you'd be hard-pressed to find deviled kidneys anywhere outside a nostalgic gastropub or an old cookbook. Most people shy away from offal altogether, let alone serve it for breakfast. But for those who tasted it once, it's unforgettable. The sting of mustard, the richness of butter, the tender bite of kidney. It wasn't just food, it was memory with spice. Before protein bars and smoothie bowls took over the morning rush, there was something far humbler and far more comforting. Treacle porridge. It was warm, it was slow, it was honest. Just a bowl of simple oats, lovingly stirred on the hob until thick and creamy, crowned with a dark, golden swirl of treacle or golden syrup, if that's what you had in the cupboard. The kind of breakfast that didn't just fill your belly. It wrapped around your bones and told you everything was going to be all right. It started with a saucepan, maybe a wooden spoon, softened from years of stirring, oats and milk, or water if times were tough. And then came the good part, a generous spoonful of Lyle's black treacle or Tate and Lyle golden syrup poured right into the middle, slowly sinking like liquid sunshine. Some kids would stir it in straight away, others would save it to the end. That sweet treasure waiting at the bottom. Either way, every bite was a mix of creamy comfort and sugary surprise. Porridge itself has deep roots in British kitchens, but adding treacle was a working-class touch, a way to make something plain feel like a treat. In households where breakfast had to be cheap and filling, treacle porridge was a daily staple, especially in the colder months. It was fuel, it was flavor, and it was the kind of thing your nan made without needing a recipe. Just instinct, memory, and love. Today, you might still find porridge pots on supermarket shelves, but they don't come close. They're flavored with fruit puree or artificial vanilla, but none of them capture that rich, molasses-like depth that treacle brought. None of them bubble on the stove while fog curls against the window pane, and none of them carry the same feeling of waking up to warmth, of sitting at the table with red cheeks and chilly toes, waiting for the first spoonful to cool. There's something beautifully British about the ritual of a soft-boiled egg, not scrambled, not poached, not fried, but boiled just right, with the yolk still golden and runny, waiting like hidden treasure beneath a delicate shell. And of course, no soft-boiled egg was ever complete without its loyal companions, toast soldiers, carefully sliced strips of buttered bread, warm and crisp, perfectly built for dipping. For many kids across Britain, this wasn't just a breakfast, it was a ceremony, a quiet, comforting ritual shared with mum or nan on chilly mornings. The egg would sit upright in its little egg cup, sometimes shaped like a chicken, a gnome, or your favorite cartoon character. You'd tap the top gently with a spoon, peel back the shell, and reveal that molten orange center, a sprinkle of salt, maybe a touch of pepper. And then came the first dip, that glorious moment when the toast soldier plunged in, soaking up yolk like a sponge. Every bite was a blend of soft and crunchy, warm and salty, simple and perfect. The origin of this classic isn't clear-cut, but for generations it's been a breakfast staple in British households. Its magic lay not in extravagance, but in care, in the timing of the boil, in the neatness of the toast, in the quiet joy of a familiar process. It taught patience, it rewarded gentleness, and it made a simple egg feel like something worth sitting down for. Parents passed the ritual to children. Grandparents remembered it fondly from their own school days. Today, it's less common. Grab-and-go breakfasts have replaced the slower pace of yesteryear. Toast soldiers have been exiled by Pop-Tarts and cereal bars. But those who grew up with them haven't forgotten the sound of a spoon tapping an eggshell, the steam rising from buttered toast, the careful dip, and the smile that followed. It wasn't just breakfast, it was a moment of peace before the day began. If you listened closely on a Monday morning in post-war Britain, you might have heard it. That faint, sizzling sound from the frying pan, a gentle hiss, a pop, a bubble, a squeak. It wasn't just noise, it was breakfast. And it came from a humble heap of leftovers brought back to life. Bubble and squeak wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. It was cabbage and potatoes, mashed, fried, and loved. A dish born from thrift, but remembered for flavor, family, and the warmth of second chances. Traditionally made from Sunday roast leftovers, bubble and squeak was the breakfast of resourceful households. Cold potatoes, sprouts, cabbage, all chopped and mixed, then pressed into a hot pan with butter or dripping. The name came from the sound it made while cooking, a playful melody of frying greens. Some versions added bits of corned beef, bacon, or onion. Others kept it simple, but no matter the recipe, it filled the house with a smell that meant home. In many working-class kitchens, this was comfort food in its purest form. It didn't matter if money was tight. If you had some veg and a bit of fat, you had breakfast. You might have eaten it at the counter, still in your dressing gown, or maybe you watched your mum press it flat in the pan, turning it carefully with a spatula until the edges turned golden and crisp. Served with brown sauce or a fried egg on top, it was a meal that hugged you from the inside out. Today, bubble and squeak has mostly vanished from the breakfast table. Few people bother to save roast veg anymore, and even fewer know how to turn it into something this good. But for those who remember, the smell alone is enough to bring back 1,000 quiet mornings. It wasn't just about not wasting food. It was about making something beautiful from what you had. And sometimes, that's the best kind of memory. You could smell it before you saw it. That rich, unmistakable scent of bread crisping in hot fat. Not toasted, not buttered, but fried. Thick slices from yesterday's loaf sizzling golden in the pan, soaking up bacon drippings or a ladle of lard. Fried bread wasn't just breakfast. It was indulgence, a rare treat in homes where every meal had to count. Crisp at the edges, soft in the middle, with just the right amount of chew. It was the crown jewel of a proper fry-up. And if you grew up in Britain a few decades ago, chances are you've got a memory or two tied to it. Fried bread was simple, brutally so. No artisan loaves or fancy seasonings. Just white bread, thick cut and preferably a bit stale, dropped into a hot pan of fat. Some used oil, but the best batches came from bacon grease or beef dripping. It wasn't health food. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to fill you up, fuel your day, and taste like something you weren't supposed to enjoy that much. And it did. Every bite felt like a rebellion against blandness. In working-class homes, especially during the 60s and 70s, fried bread was a weekend staple. It made the full English complete. Eggs, beans, sausage, and a triangle of fried bread to soak it all up. Some kids would eat it first. Others would save it till the end, letting the yolk and beans soak into it like a sponge of glory. And even if it left a greasy trail on your plate, you'd mop it up with pride. Today, it's rare, replaced by low-fat spreads, air fryers, and health-conscious alternatives. But ask anyone who grew up with it, and they'll tell you, fried bread wasn't just about taste. It was about joy. It was a little crispy victory on your plate. The kind of breakfast item that made you feel like the day might just be all right after all. If any of these breakfasts stirred something in you, a smile, a scent, a story, we'd love to hear it. Share your memories in the comments below. Tell us what your mum made or what you always hoped would be on your plate when you came down the stairs. And if you want to keep these memories alive, not just yours, but all of ours, subscribe to our channel and like this video, because here, every breakfast tells a story, and every story deserves to be remembered.